Hello everyone, I hope you're all well today. I am the introverted astrologer, and today I'm back with an in-between video. The UK has had a surprise announcement from Rishi Sunak announcing that election day will be on the 4th of July. This means that the planetary positions around the time of the 4th are very important, and so today's video will be looking closely at those. I can tell you now that one of those candidates is receiving very little help, is most likely going to be subject to some very flawed decision making, and I can see tumult and change coming for this person after the election. And the other candidate will have every ambitious fibre in their body stretched taut as they muscle in for success. Which is which? I'll also add here that I'm not voting for either of these two candidates, and so my take on their fortunes is genuinely impartial. And with that, let's go to the computer. So on Wednesday, the 22nd of May, Rishi Sunak announced in the afternoon that the election would be held on the 4th of July. I think this unexpectedly early date has caused a good deal of consternation. Many Conservative MPs have indicated that they will not be standing for election again, and there have been claims of a lot of anger within the party. My own impression is that it's very unlikely Rishi Sunak has taken or at least followed any astrologer's advice on picking this date, and I'll walk you through this now. Some of the things that astrologers would be very mindful of when picking an election day would be the positions of the planets that can be troublesome and in fact are called malefic in the old-fashioned sense. These would be the planets like Mars and Saturn, and we would be hoping to choose dates where more helpful planets like Venus and Jupiter are all assisting the natal chart as much as possible. And so what I'll do now is highlight the planetary positions that you can see in the ephemeris listed on the right side of the screen. We'll start with the Sun, and we can see that it will be moving between 12 and 13 degrees of Cancer on election day, and will not be making significant contact with any part of Sunak's chart. Mercury will be moving between 2 and 4 degrees of Leo, and again, no significant aspects are made between Mercury and Sunak's birth chart. What about Venus, one of the benefics? How will she be placed? Well, she'll be moving between 20 and 21 degrees of Cancer, so she will actually make some very weak contacts with Rishi Sunak's chart. This is because she will form sextiles, which are 60-degree apart aspects. Those sextiles will be with the Sun and Mercury and with Saturn. But the sextile is a very weak aspect, and we would really prefer one of the more dynamic aspects, a conjunction perhaps. Now, how about Mars? Mars can bring a great deal of drive, of energy and determination, and you would really want to see Mars being quite prominent and favourably aspected on election day. Well, Mars will be moving through 18 degrees of Taurus on the day, so it will be in the same sign as Rishi Sunak's own Sun and his Mercury too, but it won't be coming within a degree of them, and will really only start to energise this part of Rishi Sunak's chart in the days following the election. In fact, in those days following the election, that transiting Mars will actually begin to irritate a sensitive aspect pattern in Rishi Sunak's chart, because he has a stressful natal T-square. If I show you this T-square, which runs from Taurus across to the opposite sign of Scorpio, and then squares the node in Jupiter and his natal Mars, then you can see that transiting Mars travelling through the second half of Taurus after the election is going to trigger off this T-square, probably showing tension and stress. So this isn't a good sign. Let's move on to Jupiter, because of all planets it would be wonderful to have assistance by positive and beneficial aspect from Jupiter on election day. Well, Jupiter is around 9 degrees of Gemini at the time. And incredibly, if we look at Rishi Sunak's chart, it is making no aspects to the natal planets. We don't have an exact birth time for Rishi Sunak, and if we did, I would have been able to establish where his ascendant and midheaven were. If Jupiter was actually contacting these sensitive points, then that would be of help. But on the facts we have, Jupiter is doing nothing for Sunak in July. Now, for those of you who only know a little bit about astrology, the transiting planets that we'll be looking at from this point on move quite slowly. And from the perspective of the Earth, it seems as though they reverse position and move backwards at certain points of the year. And then as the months go by, they change position again and appear to move forwards once more. So when parts of our chart are activated by these more slow-moving planets, they can return to the same point in our charts 2 or 3 times over and play out more lengthy scenarios in our life. So we really wouldn't want to have one of these slow-moving planets making an ongoing and stressful contact with our chart during an election period, or at least if we did have 1 or 2 of these transits going on, we would want quite a few positive transits to be happening from slow-moving planets at the same time. Now, the bad news in Rishi Sunak's case is that he is indeed receiving difficult contact from a slow-moving planet, and that the election day coincides with this planet making contact. Now, I am particularly referring to Neptune here, but if I show you Neptune in Rishi Sunak's natal chart, it is down here at around 22 degrees of Sagittarius, and you can see that a red line is drawn between Neptune and Venus up here. That red line is showing us that in his birth chart, Rishi Sunak has a Venus-Neptune opposition. So he has natal difficulty with these 2 energies anyway. Neptune is now in Pisces and is 90 degrees away from his natal Venus. So he is having a repeat performance of something that we call the natal potential. And where 2 planets are not in altogether happy aspect in the natal chart, then we know that this could be tricky. We're going to be presented with a natal difficulty from a fresh perspective for us to have a look at. On the ephemeris, you will see that Neptune has got a little R in it on the 2nd of July. What has happened is that Neptune has just stationed and turned retrograde. That is what the R means. And so from our Earth perspective, it appears that Neptune has stood still in the sky and slowly is beginning to move backwards. And to have an election day scheduled for a time when an outer planet is doing this is not a good omen. What would this Neptune-Venus contact be telling us? Well, for some of us, Neptune-Venus can be a honeymoon transit. We have a crush or we fall in love. We're thoroughly swept away with the beauty of this wonderful person. But over the course of a difficult Neptune transit, the scales will fall from our eyes, and this can indeed be a painful transit. Rishi is a married man, but Venus isn't always about relationships, because Venus also represents our value system. There is a connection with money because, of course, many people value money very highly. But essentially it's the value system. And if we cast our minds back a couple of days before Sunak made his announcement about this election, you may recall a good deal of publicity about inflation coming down, claims that the cost of living were easing. And I do wonder whether this Neptune-Venus contact is telling us that Rishi Sunak really believes that money is of such high value and of such importance to the general public that they will indeed be inclined to vote for him as he rides the crest of the inflation wave. Does Rishi have quite a materialistic birth chart? One could certainly argue so, because we have quite a few Taurus placements, and Rishi's Venus is also in a special relationship with one of those planets in Taurus. This may not mean much to you, but they are classed as being in mutual reception, and so Venus and Mercury in Taurus chat to each other all the time and offer support and help between their two signs of Taurus and Gemini during Rishi Sunak's life. This is indeed one of the strengths in his chart. And so it may be that this Neptune transit squaring Rishi's Venus is speaking of a misguided belief that the public will be so very happy about recent news on inflation that it will indeed persuade them to vote for him at the ballot box. And of course, because it is a square aspect between Neptune and Venus, this is a stressful contact. And we could argue that this will be bringing Rishi that heavenly prompt to rethink his value system. Now, Rishi had made this announcement about the election in May. Was Neptune already within a degree of orb in May? It certainly was. Neptune had already reached around 29.5 degrees when Rishi made his announcement. We can also see in that ephemeris that Saturn has reached around 19 degrees and 25 minutes of Pisces. So if we look at his natal chart, we can see that Saturn is not too far out from forming an opposition to his natal Saturn. And again, these are testing times. Astrologers often use quite close orbs when making predictions about transits. And that Saturn opposing Saturn certainly comes within 1 degree of orb, but it never becomes exact. And for that reason, I can't be certain that he is having this stress as well. Saturn does reach 19 degrees and 26 minutes at the very end of June before it stations retrograde. How about Uranus? This is a planet that can bring disruption, change. We can sometimes have to rethink our plans very, very swiftly. Well, the ephemeris position has it at almost 26 degrees of Taurus on election day. And so the only thing it's really within 1 degree of is Rishi Sunak's North Node. This is the part of our chart which is said to explain where we are heading in life, our life path, the qualities that we have come here to develop in this lifetime. And it can also show the associations or contacts that we have with the people around us during our life. I'm not sure it will be highly relevant on election day, but this is part of an ongoing transit that Rishi's experiencing this year, because he will be having that Uranus opposing his natal Uranus and squaring this North Node during the unfolding of 2024. And so it wouldn't be surprising if issues of freedom, of fulfillment, am I happy with what I am doing? Am I expressing myself in a fulfilling way in this area of my life? Or do I need to chop and change and go? These may be things that are under consideration during 2024 for Rishi. If we also look at Pluto, this tiny outer planet packs a powerful and transformative punch, but there is no positive or stressful contact with Rishi's chart at the time of election. Now, you may have noticed a lot of other figures and glyphs around Rishi Sunak's basic chart. This video only covers the planetary positions on election day. If you are interested in an analysis of Rishi's basic birth chart and his progressions and solar arcs, etc., then please take a look at the other video that I've put together on this. I'll put a link for it in the description below this video. And now we're going to repeat the process with Kier Starmer's chart. Do the planets on the day hamper his position at all? We know that he is tipped to have a landmark win anyway? Can we see any unexpected difficulties arising on the day? The Sun is moving between 12 and 13 degrees of Cancer and makes no contacts within a degree of orb. And ditto for Mercury, which is moving between roughly 2 and 4 degrees of Leo. We can see that Mercury will go on to form a sextile to his natal Mercury and to oppose his natal Saturn in the couple of days following the election. It can bring a passing sense of feeling somewhat isolated from the world or pessimistic, and one could envisage that these people are inordinately exhausted at the end of these drawn-out, full-on campaigning periods. But Mercury-Saturn will also be bringing that self-discipline over our mental powers, the ability to think critically and see the details. How about Venus? Moving through 20 to 21 degrees of Cancer. Again, we have no contact. Now Mars is moving through 18 degrees of Taurus, so that makes no contact either. But as we come to Jupiter, all of a sudden we can start seeing something quite dramatic happening. If you look at Keir Starmer's natal chart, he has something that is quite unusual, a very helpful pattern between his natal planets. It's called a kite, and in Keir's case it is drawing together some very strong and helpful planets in this kite pattern, and so he has help in his life from many planets if he chooses to develop those strengths, and I believe he has. And as part of this kite pattern, we can see Jupiter down there on the tail of the kite. This Jupiter, together with the other planets, is part of what has made Keir's life a successful one in terms of developing himself, using these many talents and pushing forward. There is a degree of ruthlessness and almost unearthly determination in this kite too, and we all have our different definitions of success. But because this Jupiter is part of the kite, we can see that on election day, Jupiter is moving near to 9 degrees of Gemini. And so what is it doing? Well, it is forming a dynamic square aspect to parts of this kite. It's already within orb of a square to that Sun and Pluto, which is part of Keir's relentless drive to the top. And it's recently left a square position to his own natal Jupiter. So in the days leading up to the election, on election day itself, Jupiter is expanding and reinvigorating this natal kite. The square aspect is a dynamic aspect of tension and drive, and it is acting on Keir's Sun and Pluto. It's expanding the energy of the ego and the need to be successful, to better ourselves, to seek out powerful positions, and we can be obsessive. And so the timing of election day, in my opinion, benefits Keir Starmer far more than it does Rishi. And what about Saturn, which is of course classed as one of the malefic planets? Will that be affecting Keir? No. At 19 odd degrees of Pisces, Keir is not going to be hampered by any difficult Saturn transits. The same also goes for Neptune, and Pluto too makes no major aspects to Keir Starmer's chart. Now, we picked up that Rishi Sunak would be having some Uranus contacts during the course of 2024. And in a way, Keir Starmer is as well. It isn't what we call one of the major Ptolemaic aspects. It's an inconjunct aspect, or a quincunx, which means that Uranus will be 150 degrees away from Keir's natal Venus over here in Libra. This will be quite a lengthy transit, and I don't believe it damages his opportunities around election time, but generally speaking, during the course of the year, this Uranus-Venus quincunx can lead to disruption in relationships and potentially value systems, We could chop and change relationships and experience a severing of ties and perhaps a reappraisal of what we hold dear. And of course, we could also anticipate that with these sudden changes in our role in life, there will be extra pressures placed on the relationships with people around us. Before we end this video, I'd just like to point out that Jupiter will carry on moving through the sign of Gemini over the ensuing summer holidays. And when the House of Commons reconvenes after the summer break, Jupiter is going to start making contact with parts of Rishi's chart. Initially, there will be a trine to his natal Pluto, and this is quite an ambitious kind of transit under which we want to make things better and improve things around us. There is personal ambitiousness with this, and if our ambitions are unselfish, we can make great strides with this energy. However, that same transiting Jupiter will also begin squaring Rishi's natal Saturn, and under this contact, we suddenly become aware that something is wrong. We're not always sure what it is that's wrong. We can be feeling very uncertain, but we are brought to a halt. And no matter how hard we try, we cannot carry on with everything as we used to. Both of these aspects start gathering in strength late August, and they become exact for the first time during September. These will be lengthy transits for Sunak, becoming exact again in November of this year, and not completing until April of 2025. So it will be interesting to keep an eye on Rishi's political career after our elections are out of the way. I hope this was informative for you. I have never seen the UK in such a state, and I know we're screaming out for change. And so whatever way you're voting, I hope the 5th of July sees you feeling more optimistic and hopeful about the future of the UK. And for now, take care. God bless you and your families.